All right, guys, welcome back. I am at Nene's Comics again. Frank was kind enough to let me videotape over here again today. So what I wanted to talk about today for just a few minutes is the idea of sacrifice in comics and how characters have to lose something, or it makes it for a more interesting character if they go through trials and tribulations and they lose something. Think about Spider-Man. Spider-Man lost his Uncle Ben. In the new Ultimate Comics Spider-Man that came out last week, he actually lost his Aunt May. It gives that tragedy. It goes all the way back to Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote about tragedies and comedies. Tragedy causes people to get involved with those characters. And as we were all kids, when we were kids, then we always thought about those characters. And those characters were larger than life. And so I was rereading Scion today, and it was the first 6 issues. And Scion was a book that came out from CrossGen back in the early 2000s, and it was Ron Mars and Jim Chung, Don Hillsman, and Cesar Rodriguez. And the first 6 issues talks about Ethan, who was a prince. It was almost like a Prince Valiant type character. And he goes to combat, he goes to battle. And as he goes to battle, he injures his opponent. He's not supposed to be able to create an injury that can't be healed. But a sigil or a tattoo or something pops up on his arm right before the battle. And so he injures his opponent. Well, his opponent's family, it's kind of like Game of Thrones, where you have 2 different warring families. The opponent's family says, well, we'll take him back as collateral for wounding our son. We'll take him back to the dungeon and he can live here with us for a year. His father argues and says no. He comes back and says, no, this is the right thing to do. So he goes with them. And the character's name is Ethan, and the opponent's name was Braun. And they did battle in this arena of combat, and every generation they would do that to kind of keep the peace between the 2 families. And when Braun was injured, then it set up a whole new dynamic, because there was allegations of cheating, and that Ethan didn't know what weapon he had, or that he brought an illegal weapon in that would cause a damage to Braun's face that couldn't be healed, because the healers were always supposed to be able to heal no matter what injury became of the character. So, long story short, the first 6 issues of this title talk about Ethan finding this sigil on his arm, and he interacts with a character named Ashley, who turns out to be Braun's sister. But she doesn't agree with the slavery and the lesser classes, as they called them in the book, being under the thumb of the aristocracy. So she's trying to do her best to get everybody on a level playing field, and she tries to get Ethan to come in there and be part of that. He wants to get back home to his family because he knows that they need him back home. So he didn't escape, but he was let loose by bigger forces at play. And the idea of sacrifice comes in that they have a big war at the beginning of the 6th issue, and his 2 brothers, Kai and Arthur, get involved, and they just have this massive war. It's like Game of Thrones times 10. And as it goes on, Braun runs into Arthur, who's one of Ethan's older brothers, and they battle. And he ends up killing Arthur. So there comes the sacrifice in that character's story arc that makes you feel more about him and makes him infinitely more entertaining. Captain America lost Bucky. Spider-Man lost Uncle Ben. A lot of characters, even Tony Stark with his sobriety, he lost his sobriety. That brings him down and makes him more human and makes the characters more interesting and the story more interesting. And it gives it depth and layers that you don't get sometimes in a novel. Sometimes you don't get that in a movie. You just get that in comic books because you have that melding of art and literature, and art and words, art and pictures, that brings all that together. So I just wanted to talk about sacrifice, and that's the first thing that makes a hero. That's the first thing that makes a heroic character, is if you go back and look at any kind of literature, old literature like Shakespeare, things like that, there's always that tragedy to go along with the comedy. There's always that downfall that comes with being lifted up. So if you ever see a video or talk to somebody and they tell you the comics are not as adept at creating character depth as novels or movies or any other visual medium or any kind of medium at all, then steer them towards Scion. Let them try the first 6 issues of Scion and see how they feel after that. Give them a copy of Watchmen. Give them a copy of Sandman. So many different books that have been out there that show the sacrifice of the hero, and that sometimes it's better to show weakness than just strength all the time. I personally don't care for the DC characters as much as I care for Marvel, because to me, the Marvel characters are more followable. Peter Parker was in high school. He was getting picked on as a nerd. He had high school classes. He had all these responsibilities as a photographer for the Daily Bugle. He had to juggle all of that. And that's not to say that Superman doesn't have responsibilities at the Daily Planet, but it is to say that it never really feeds into his life. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, or Stan Lee and John Romita Sr. could have done an entire issue where Peter Parker's world is completely upended because he forgot to go eat lunch with Aunt May. There have been issues like that. But you'll never really see an issue of Superman where if he misses a lunch date with Lois or misses a special dinner with Lois, say being anniversary or something like that between the two of them, it's not going to completely upend his world. So just think about that as you go through the day, and think about the sacrifices that your favorite characters have made. And down in the comments below, give me a couple of more ideas about what you think is a really good story that has a lot of character interaction, and it's got sacrifice between two characters that are very important to one another. And if you haven't, please like and subscribe. Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed reading Scion again and taking the time to get reacquainted with one of my favorite characters. Again, that was Scion by Cross Gen Comics. It was written by Ron Mars and penciled by Jim Chung. So like I said, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.